the tree that teaches us we need to be rooted in order to grow tall and be strong. We thank you for all these and many others if we have the ears to hear. Mesicho Kalakolonis.
Thank you. Emily, do you want to introduce yourself and say anything to folks there?
Sure. Okay, we got off a little bit. I'm going to be like the timekeeper and sort of the conversation facilitator. So I'm Emily Martin. I am a high school science teacher at the Hood River Valley High School, and I teach patterns physics, which I'm sure lots of you are familiar with, to 9th graders. And then I teach earth science to 11th and 12th graders. And I had the good fortune and privilege of meeting Milt and Ilarion through a course that they hosted. Gosh, it's almost been a year, which, you know, we're just in this time warp with the pandemic. So last spring, Milt put on a course locally here through our community college that was called Co-Creating a Sustainable World. And the idea and implementation of was to bring together Native elders and others from the indigenous community around the Americas to help us just understand Native perspectives and think about sustainability and climate change from a Native perspective. It was really inspiring, and it just led me on a path to think about how can I incorporate that into my own classroom. And so I've been working with Milt and Ilarion to try out different things and to be emergent, which is something that we'll talk about, which seems to be a quality of Native wisdom. So allow us to be emergent a little bit in this conversation and just to see what emerges for us and how we can learn and grow together in the next hour and a half. Briefly, Milt is a writer and a thinker and someone who cares deeply about the earth. Ilarion is a leader of his people, the Unangan people, who are from the Pribilof Islands. And he is also a leader in the Wisdom Weavers of the World, which is a group of indigenous elders who are trying to bring different perspectives and really bring the indigenous perspective forward in the debate about climate change. And so it's just really a treat to have both of these amazing people with us today. So I think right now, Milt, you are on for leading an appreciative inquiry. You're going to tell us what the heck that means, and then we're going to do it.
All righty. Well, thank you, Emily. That was a beautiful introduction. Thank you. Yeah, what we'd like to do just to get started, rather than take the time for everybody to introduce themselves, but to get to know each other a little bit better. I hope some of you are familiar with appreciative inquiry, but it's a process where we get in touch with the virtues that we cherish most in life. And I find it fits, it's like hand in glove with the other work that I'm doing with talking circles with the indigenous people. And it just fits with the whole, my whole orientation towards sustainability and in dealing with climate change. So each of you will be assigned a breakout room. You'll be paired with another person. Probably won't know them, but maybe you will. And they'll be posted in the chat box. Leah's posting in the chat box the following information. The inquiry is about what brings life to your job. So please get in touch with a deeply moving moment in your learning, one that was an incredible aha, and both influenced you to be an educator and continues to influence how you educate today. We'll pair you up in breakout rooms, and each person will have 3 minutes to share their experience. And Leah will let you know when it's time to switch. She'll give you a little bit of warning, and it's probably plenty of time. So just listen carefully to your partner, and we'll have a short group conversation afterwards where a few people will be able to share the impacts of their partner's story. So listen carefully to your partner, enjoy the process, and we'll come back in about 6 minutes or 7 minutes and share a little bit, and then we'll get on with the program.
And Milt and Ilarion, would you like to be in rooms as well, or do you want to stay here in the main session?
I would love to be in a room.
Fantastic. It's much easier for me as well. Okay, I'll go ahead and start the rooms. You'll see an invitation to join, and you can go ahead and join your room. Hi, Karen. Are you just joining us? All right, great. I think everybody's back from your breakout room discussion.
Milt, you're muted. Are you gonna ask folks about their experience?
I did. I just asked him. You didn't hear. I'm sorry. So is everyone back, Leah? Okay, everyone. Does anyone want to share what they heard from their partner and kind of what the aha was for them? Anybody? I can't see people if they have their hands raised. Can you see, Leah?
Oh, Carrie just unmuted.
Yeah, hi. I'll go.
Okay.
I had the amazing opportunity to speak with Ilarion, and forgive me if I don't say the name correctly. Um, we we shared, and his story was about watching birds as a young child in the Alaskan island where he grew up in the Bering Sea, and the thing that struck me the most about it was the amazing ability of children, their wide open mental horizons and spaces to be able to achieve and manifest whatever they really put their minds to, because he was able to attain complete mental clarity and um, I hesitate to say a blank state, but to shut off all of the other dialogues or thoughts we have in our minds and just have nothing, because he had deduced that the birds must do that in order to not run into each other when there's a huge flock taking off for the morning. So I believe I got that kind of correct, but it was really lovely to hear, and it speaks a lot to what I hope we can do for our kids, to remind them that they have that ability and power.
Carrie, thank you. Is there anyone else? Is there anybody else's hand up, Leah?
I think Patty's unmuted.
Yeah, in my group were Rose and Daryl, and Rose shared that for her own life, nature is a guide. It's paying attention to what's going on around her and being out, and that things are connected. The calm that nature can provide is that they're connected, and just having a sense of connectedness can make people feel empowered. So those were the kind of the themes for her. And integrating nature experiences with her classes is embedded.
Patty, thank you. One more?
I'll go. My group both people in my group, Leah and Karen, talked about going out into the world and getting to experience science as a hands-on activity rather than a list of things that you learn in a book. And that was very connecting to them. one from that moment on and one from that moment, then lost and then back again.
Mhm.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Wow. So Emily, you want to introduce Ilarion? And the next thing we really want to share is a kind of a comparison between native science and non-native science.
I think you did it. I think you did it,
That's
Milt.
it?
So let's
Okay.
hand it over to Ilarion to just share some wisdom. What do we mean when we say the words native science? What are we missing from the Western scientific perspective when we think about climate change and other pressing problems? Thanks, Ilarion.
Okay, Angwan, Kamagala Kamna Kamagala Kasuda, Tingunagan Way, Unangan Kuyach. I said, hello, my other self, which is the way we greet each other every day amongst my people who are Westerners call us Aleuts, but we don't use that name because that's the name given to us by our former oppressors. I said we are called Unangan, which is like the real people by the sea. And my traditional name is Kuyach, which means like an arm extending out from the body, carrier of ancient knowledge into modern times, a messenger. And I was given that name at 4 years old by the last Kuyach that was left alive amongst all of our people in the Aleutian chain in Pribilof Islands. And now I'm living the legacy of my name, so I'm really grateful to be here with you all. Who are educators. I guess in a way I'm kind of an educator too, but it's more like relaying messages and stories. So bear with me. Anyway, my people were very grounded, and we have stories about us coming out of Egypt, going to out of Mongolia to Siberia to Kamchatka and across by traditional skin craft. And we've been out in the Bering Sea for over 10,000 years and we're still there. And so my generation was the last generation that had a fully traditional upbringing. And it was quite complete. So to get to know my grandfather, for my grandfather to get to know me, I had to be with him 24/7, starting at age 4 years old, for 2 years. And when I say 24/7, I went to work with him. I went to visit his friends every day. We would go down to the beach and take off our shirts and wash ourselves in the Bering Sea, praying towards the east. And that night we might go to the Russian Orthodox Church, because he saw no difference about how one found one's spirituality. Then I had an Acha, a traditional mentor, that at age 5, and it's not like your typical mentor relationship. It goes much deeper, where the older person and the younger person see each other and they know instantly that's my Acha. And you end up calling each other Acha. And he taught me much of what I know about being a man, about reverence for all life, about sharing, about cooperation, and all the ethics and values of Unangan people. And yet, from age 5 to age 13, he may have said no more than 200 words to me, because words were considered superfluous and may even be dangerous. And this is why the Acha relationship needs to happen that organically, rather than it be appointed or because of some tradition. Anyway, my dad gave me the skiff and the motor at 11 years old. He said I could skipper the boat and I would go out in the Bering Sea up to 10 miles away from the island at age 11. We were fishing for halibut by hook, line, and sinker. And today, you couldn't get most kids to do that. That would be considered probably child abuse or something like that. But anyway, I got to, my whole village raised me. I had to spend equal time with the men, with the women, with the elders, and with my peers. The men would teach me the men's ways and hunting and fishing. The women would teach me the women's ways and preparing food and all the kinds of things that women do. The elders would tell me nothing but stories. Every weekend they would invite me and I would go out and we'd go camping. They'd always tell me stories from age 5 to age 13. You can imagine how that must be, having so many years of hearing stories by the elders. And then with my peers, of course, I would just to play. And it was just a wonderful upbringing, because the island that I grew up from had at that time about 1.4 million northern fur seals, 2.5 million seabirds, 1,000 reindeer, and 500 Unangan people on an island that's 12 miles long and 5 miles wide. So you can imagine, it was a magical place to be raised as a child. And so what I want to talk about, I guess, we call this emergent because, you know, we are best talking from our hearts. And the only way you can do that is emergent. Otherwise, you know, one elder taught me, he said, anybody has to read from a piece of paper in front of a group of people has no business being there. And I took that to heart. And so I talk without any notes or anything like that. I see what inspires me and what the group inspires me to do. So you're all in science, and you probably can remember as a child what brought you to science in the first place. Probably has to do with the environment and some aspect of the environment. And you know how children are when they're outdoors. Whether or not they are aware of it, but when the younger they are, the more aware they are. And you put your feet on the ground barefoot, you're grounding yourself. And then when you see a plant or a bug or something, an insect, you just get fascinated and get into it all the way. Just be with that living thing for maybe an hour, maybe longer. You all can remember why you fell in love with what you're doing now. But one of the things that we do as adults is that we operate out of the mind so much that we forgot how that feels to be able to do those things that, as a child. The elders here, we got 222 tribes in Alaska. And they're all different cultures. There's 12 different major cultures in Alaska. And the elders that we talk about are people who retain the innocence of the child and the wisdom of adults. That's a true elder. When you see the twinkle in their eyes, you know that that's an elder. They don't have to say anything, you just know. And so we're lucky in Alaska where we still consume more food per pound per capita wild foods than any other group in the whole US. About 300 pounds per capita of wild foods per year. And because of that, we have a close relationship with the environment and everything that lives in it. And the people had to have 100%, I would like for you to think about this. The people had to have had 100% accuracy in knowing what they're going out into before they go, because it can be very dangerous when you're out in the wilderness. And it can be very, in Alaska, of course, it can be very cold. And you have to really know what you're doing, because you always are identified, or the person is identified as all of the people who are part of the hunting party are leaders. And of course, the most experienced hunter or fisherman is always the main lead. And they have to be 100% accurate in reading the environment. Because if they're not that 100% accurate, people die and or your people go hungry. And this is something that very few people understand or have heard about in terms of indigenous cultures who've had intimate relationship with their environment for generations. But this is true, and I learned it myself. And for example, when I go out fishing, we fish for halibut, and it's hook, line, and sinker. And my dad gave me the boat and motor because at 11 years old, because he knew that I knew how to read the weather. I knew the winds and tides and currents. I knew what happens when wind comes from the south, north, east, or west. I could even tell you, I could even navigate in pea soup thick fog, where I could feel the energy of where I am. So that when you're in pea soup thick fog, I did this at, I don't know, I was 14 or 15 years old, and I wanted to impress my girlfriend, and we couldn't see in front of the boat. And I said, okay, you go to the other side of the island, go to this one rock and wait there, because I'll be there. So what I did is I went around the island in pea soup thick fog and go exactly to the rock that I identified. And the way that I did that was by feeling the energy of the water, and notice the rhythm of the water, the motion of the water, the tension of the water, and these kinds of things, where I could feel what direction the tide is from and how fast it's moving. And I could see birds coming out from the fog over the boat, and I would note what kind of species they are and what time of day it is, because then I'd know if they're foraging, going out, or coming back in. And so all of these pieces of information would help me to become a good hunter. And being a good hunter is more than just skill. This is something that is hard to explain, but you know, when you're just sitting and waiting for an animal or a fish to come by, you are taking the position of the feminine side of yourself, where you are waiting and you are waiting for the animal to come to you, not for you to come to the animal. When we get the animal, we share it. We always have to be cooperative with everyone who is in the hunt. And we share by giving them equal portions of the take from the hunt. All these kinds of things are considered feminine, and somehow in today's society, for a man to have that feminine side is considered negative. But hopefully now that's changing. But the man cannot be whole unless you have that feminine side in balance with the masculine side. The masculine is outward, so it takes the action, and you need to receive the action, the results of the action. And the best hunters were always those people who had this balance between the masculine and feminine. And that has guided us for thousands of years. My people had the most densely populated linear mile of shoreline than any people in all of North America for our time. Most densely populated linear mile of shoreline in a place that's very hard to eke out a living. And we didn't have footwear, even in the wintertime. We didn't have food storage technologies except for wind. And we're the only native people that didn't have food storage technologies or footwear. And that's because, you know, my elder on St. Paul would say, you know, look at that bird flying over there. It doesn't worry about where it's going to get its food the next day. Why should we? Are we any different? And of course, the answer is no. We are struggling to try to find ways to help Mother Earth. And we need to open up our hearts, really. Open up your mind is second, but we need to open up to allow different ways of thinking and seeing to occur, and to give it equal weight as you give what you understand to be best available science. And you know, we Native people, we call it's a science, but it's a science in a way that most people don't understand. So for example, Western scientists come out to Alaska, and they have an epistemology, I maintain, epistemology, which is this science that they carry. And they apply that, and it's reductionist, and it's, I'm not criticizing it, I'm just noting what characteristics of the science is. It's reductionist, it's takes apart small parts of the whole, and to study it, to understand, try to understand the whole itself. It uses a hypothesis system, and it's data driven. And the native science is quite different. There is an internal validation system that we use that's informal. And anything informal is considered, I don't know what it would be considered by scientists, but it's not science. And what we do, I'll give you an example. I'll tell you a story. I was up in Chalkitsik in the interior of Alaska, and there were 7 chiefs that were called together by the state of Alaska, the Department of Fish and Game. And the guy there wanted to explain why they're cutting down subsistence take a moose. And he was doing aerial transects. And so he was explaining how these aerial transects work, and they were counting the bull to female ratio. And that's how they would determine the cut moose that they're proposing for the people. Well, they listened for 45 minutes. Then the lead chief said, have you noticed that the water levels in the rivers are going down? He says, no, you know, I'm doing aerial transects. That's hydrology. That's a different department. Have you noticed that when the water levels go down, the forage that the moose eat disappear? And he says, no, you know, forage, that's vegetation. That's not my field. He says, well, he said, did you notice that there are more beaver dams in the area? He says, no, well, beaver, that's not an area that we're concerned about. We're concerned about moose. And the guy said, the chief said, "Oh, have you noticed that there are more beavers in our rivers than ever before? And they even are above the Arctic Circle." He said, no, you know, I know that you're trying to tell me this, but my job is to do aerial transects. Maybe you should go to the Board of Game. And the Board of Game in Alaska, you could hear the silent things, the silent groans of the chiefs, because the Board of Game is mandated to use the best available science. And by definition, native ways of knowing are not best available science. It's anecdotal information that may or may not be useful. And so what's happening as a result of that, I mean, I work with elders from all over the world in what is called the wisdom weavers of the world. And we are trying to help people understand, number one, that native ways of knowing have a great deal of value if it's used properly. And that number two, that the world needs this information now. They're saying that we don't have any time left. Human beings are acting as if they've got all the time in the world, but yet they're saying Mother Earth has survived for billions of years. She's going to survive for billions more. It's a question about whether or not we human beings are going to survive. And it's going to be decided, they say, by this generation of people alive in the world today. It's going to be decided by all of us here now. And that they said that the world is looking in the wrong direction to solve the problems. Even Einstein said, you can't solve the problems with the same consciousness that created the problems. The same consciousness that created the problems, which is what we're doing with everything. Even the state-of-the-art technology and thinking is doing just that. And that when we choose to focus on what we are reacting to stop wars, to stop killings, murders, the violent abuse of women, the political corruption, social injustices, we are reacting to what we're facing. And they said that many people of good heart are doing this without realizing that we are energy, without realizing that we are energy beings, mental, physical, and spiritual energy, that when we focus that way on what we're reacting to, the energy goes into the very thing we're reacting to and feeds it. And that we must stop feeding this. And that what we must do is focus on that which we want to see in the world today without reaction to anything. Yes, go do your thing with what you're trying to stop, but don't pour your mental, physical, and spiritual energies into that. Pour it into that which you want to see. And, you know, this, everything that is in operation today, including the educational paradigms that we are utilizing, are based on fallacious thinking that was created thousands of years ago. And that fallacy is that we control things, therefore we can manage, and we don't have humility because we declare what is going to be a keystone species, as if we know, really. I was at the White House Conference on the Oceans. 4 Native Americans were allowed to be there. I was one of them during the Clinton administration. And I got to talk to the plenary. And I talked to 500 of the US top marine scientists. And I asked them a simple question. What is the most abundant marine mammal in the world, in the world's oceans? Not marine mammal, marine organism. What is the most abundant marine organism in the world's oceans? And so I asked them to think about it quietly, and then when I point you out, would you please answer? And of course, everybody had all kinds of answers, but none of them had the right answer. It was marine viruses. I don't know who counted it, but in a single teaspoon of seawater are billion sea viruses. And I point out to that group, there's only one scientist in the whole of the United States, all the scientists in the United States that's studying sea viruses. And it's not even declared a keystone species.
Ilarion, this is great. Move us to the next part, and then we'll come back to you. I hate to interrupt the stories, but I'm supposed to be the timekeeper. Okay. Thank you. Okay, Milt. So that's actually a really good, kind of a nice segue. I'm going to make it a nice segue, even though I just did a really harsh interruption. The segue is that, okay, so we want to focus on what we want to see, not put energy towards what we don't want. That's sort of what I got from you, but you said it much more eloquently and beautifully. So Milt has a hands-on experience that he does in classrooms, that he did in my classroom and some other places, and he's going to share that, getting at this idea of sort of paradigm shift, which is what you were also talking about. So let's transition to Milt, and then we'll come back for more stories from Ilarion.
Okay, Leah, do you have the slides up on yours? Could you bring them up?
Oh, I can share them for you in just a second.
Or do you want me to share from my screen?
Why don't you share, because I don't have PowerPoint, so mine might not be formatted 100%.
Oh, okay. So I will do that. Yeah, thank you, Ilarion, and that really is a good segue. Let me just, I assume I can share my screen now. So this is the screen, and what I want to share with you for just a moment is building off what Ilarion said about the consciousness that created a problem isn't sufficient for solving it, and how in Emily's class and several other classes, we've shared this piece of a few charts and watch the kids go through a paradigm shift. So I don't know if you're seeing the chart there. Are you seeing it? Yes, okay. So several years ago, there was a gentleman that came to Portland for a systems thinking and sustainability conference. And he asked us 40 questions when he was done giving his keynote address and so forth. 20 questions on, do you think mechanically or organically? And 20 other questions on, is your worldview one of scarcity or one of abundance? And he just did a scatter graph when it was done. And what he concluded, and he was just gathering data, I think that's really what he was all about, was that sustainability people, like he considered us, ended up in this upper right-hand quadrant, scared to death that there wasn't enough water, enough food, enough soil, that we were just in bad shape, which we are, and that they wanted people to share, and it was a compassionate point of view, to respect each other and to share, and that was the message. And then when he talked to business people, what he found was that they thought that from an abundance point of view, that they could take and take and take, that they would deal with it mechanically and they would make money with it. And so I shared that with the kids because I had some dissonance with it and so on. And went in the next day and said to this gentleman, have you ever thought about the two quadrants? and then I'll share with you what I shared with the kids. He said, no, what do you think they are? And I said, well, these are the warring people, the colonizers, because they have the mechanical advantage. They see scarcity, often perceived, and they go after it. And these are the earth-based or indigenous people of the world, because they think organically to the depths of their soul, and I'll explain that, how they think differently in terms of what they believe to be organic. And I'm not one of them, so I can only tell you this from my vantage point. But also they see abundance very, very differently. And here's how it is for them that I've observed, is that they, as Ilarion just stated, all of the world is alive. It is a living system. It is in continual change. It also is continually self-organizing. And it's cleansing and healing and restructuring in this very emergent fashion that we've been talking about. And also that all life has been endowed with several life processes. So we know we're all part of a life-death cycle. We know we've been given perfect order. There's zero waste in nature. We know that, that we can recreate our species, just like all species recreate themselves with integrity, that we seek what we need. So there's this natural laws of interdependence, and there's an attraction quality. And the best word I know for it is love. That love is not so much an emotion as it's something that's been given to us. So they view the world through this sense of love and awe and wonder and beauty and wisdom. And that's quite different than the organic that was just about compassion. Embedded in this is lots of compassion and caring and sharing. But over and above that is a very systemic view of the world. And as far as abundance goes, where the Western world was that you could take and take and take, the indigenous view is that the earth will always provide as long as we recognize the intrinsic value of life and honor our mutual responsibilities, how we harvest, how we plant, how we trod the land, everything about it. And also to honor a covenant that we have with all these life support dependencies. You know, we are in this in a harmonious way. So the earth was given to us in balance and harmony. There's an energetic connection. And if there's dissonance, we have to clean it up. So when it comes to healing and reconciliation and so forth, it's like both parties are feeling the dissonant energy, and it's a responsibility to clean it up. They live in gratitude and appreciation. So I hope I'm not going through this too fast, but this is the chart again. Usually I have it laid out on the floor. Once the virus hit, we just do it on Zoom like we're doing tonight. But this is what I explained to the kids, you know, when they were looking at the mechanical organic line, there's one way of viewing organic from the Western world, and there's quite a different way, a systemic way from the natural earth-based peoples. And in terms of abundance, the abundance in the Western world is about taking, just ravaging the earth now, to a sufficient abundance that the earth will always provide as long as we meet our mutual responsibilities. So I asked the kids, I said, kids, and I do this in 5th grade all the way up through high school, even done it through graduate school. The results are different as you get higher. But with the younger kids then, I asked the kids 4 questions, and you're welcome to type into the chat box your answer to this, to each of the 4 questions. And the first question is, here we go, the chat box is up, the polls are up. Thank you, Leah. The first question is, kids, I want you to think about your life today and who you're being, not in the moment, but just in general. Which of the 4 quadrants best describes who you're being? And they, you know, is it 1, the business, warring, social justice, or earth-based perspective? So you can put your answers in, and I won't tell you what the kids answered typically until we get right to the end. The second question I asked them is, which quadrant best describes who your parents and your parents' generation is being? And they, if they're walking it, will walk from one quadrant to another. The third question I asked them is which quadrant best describes who the country is being? Is it one, business? Are they warring people? Is the country interested in social justice or earth-based perspectives? And they answer the question. And then I ask them the fourth question. I say, you know, kids are going to graduate, you're going to go on to college, you're going to maybe go to work, but you're going to be thinking now over the next few years more and more about your life work. Which of the four quadrants best describes who you want to be when you enter the workforce and do your life work? And I don't know what is shown in the quadrants here, but I will tell you that the kids invariably pick social justice as this is the quadrant that describes who I'm being today. And when they're asked about the parents, they generally move to the business perspective, almost all of them. And when they ask about which quadrant best represents the country, it depends quite a bit on the state of the mind of the country. When we were in the Iraqi war, they flooded this place. I think now with the insurrection, they probably would be back here again. The fourth question I asked, and Emily can talk a little bit about this, what happened in her class and so forth, is almost always unanimous that they move to this quadrant here. And sometimes line up along the edge, that they see themselves, I think as I see myself, as just a bridge, that I get a glimpse of it, but I really have to rely on the messages like Ilarion just spoke and will speak again. So the thing that's amazing about this for me is that, and this always happens in less than a class period, it's usually 35 or 40 minutes, is that the kids have gone through a paradigm shift. And I maintain that they probably went through some type of awakening of an already knowing. They shifted from social justice to the earth-based perspective, large percentages, okay? They also, I think, recognize that they have to shift. Here we go. You guys all see that? So 3 is the big guy. 4, oh, a lot of the kids, a lot of you people are into the earth-based. And here's the business. And wow. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of those. I want to get back to Ilarion here as quickly as I can. So the second paradigm shift is from scarcity to sufficient abundance. And the third paradigm shift is how do we infuse this wisdom into each of the other cultures? Because for the most part, like in social justice perspective, the earth-based perspective is a superset. They deal with very compassionately, with responsibility and with kindness and with sharing beyond what I feel in our country. But they also are dealing with it very systemically, of understanding that every other system is a life support system for something else. And there's this beautiful interdependencies. With regard to the warring.
I was going to say, there was a question about what the K's stand for and the W. So if you can make sure you say that.
I will say that. Okay, I won't forget. The warring is a very interesting thing. I don't know about Ilarion's tribe, but in many of them, it is the clan mother that decides whether the tribe goes to war or not. So I think about that and I kind of laugh, like, can you imagine the clan mother walking into George Bush and Dick Cheney and Rumsfeld and before they go into Iraq and saying, not so fast, boys, and making it stick. And with the business, I've worked in this area a little bit, not a lot, but when I was asked to help with a business, developing a business for a supportable lifestyle, I said I wouldn't focus on business. I would focus on the guiding principles of ecological integrity and social harmony. And then I would develop the economic system so that it didn't compromise any of those principles. And there were 3 indigenous people in the room at that time, and all 3 of them said, of course, that's what you do. So I think the K's, I was showing this chart to a gentleman named Matthew Fox, some of you may know him, and he said, well, Milt, the business, the warring, and the social justice are all Western constructs, and the earth-based is a wisdom construct. So this is the third paradigm shift, is to infuse that wisdom into the knowledge-based constructs. So I think what I want to do is just turn this back over to Emily right now, rather than take any more time. And you can have these charts. We can send these charts out to you when we're done.
That was great, Milt. Yeah, so Milt came into my earth science classroom and did this, and really similar to what you just saw with our group, right? Most students identify with the social justice. That seems to be like a really high meme, and a really empowered stance to take, especially with climate change, which is something we talk a lot about in my class. But then they all wanted to be in that earth-based quadrant. And I'm still very much my brain, even though like I have this knowing and this sort of deep earth wisdom taught to me through my spiritual practice. And so I have all that down here in my heart, but when I'm teaching, I'm in my head and I'm really in the Western science box. Even after a year of talking to Milt and Ilarion and really trying. And so I gave this assignment last spring that was a response to Greta Thunberg. I just said, here's some videos of Greta speaking to the United Nations. Here's some articles about her. She was just identified as the Time Person of the Year for 2019. She's your age. What do you think about Greta? What are you passionate about? Would you stand up like she did? And of 20 students in my class, 19 of them were all about like really supportive of Greta and like inspired by her and all this stuff. And one student who's a transfer student, English is her second language. She came here from Vietnam. She wrote this essay that blew me away that was all about, okay, well, Greta's okay, but we have to shift our consciousness. It was amazing. I have it. I've saved it because it was just completely out of the box. Like we were all in this box of stand up, go on strike, like be loud, blame the politicians, blame the fossil fuel industry, right? And this teenager, she was, I brought it here to read. I could read a little bit, but she said, I admired Greta when she was my age, but I thought of stopping. Her English isn't very well, so it might come out a little botched. But I thought of stopping climate change, but she still made the mistake of blaming the people around her. Why don't each of us revisit our consciousness? We know our thoughts. We know our actions. We're the smartest animals on earth. Why are we letting our consciousness go bad? So we are intelligent. Please control your consciousness. Do not blame, but act to change for the whole society. Don't pay attention to the grass and the thoughts and actions of others, but first take out the dead tree in your own thoughts and actions. When everyone is aware, I am sure climate change will be mitigated most incredible ever. So apologies for the brokenness of that, but like to me, it's like, that's exactly what we're talking about. And our dominant culture, the voices that we're hearing are not these voices, right? And so it speaks to the necessity of elevating, a diversity of voices. And now I want to pass it to Ilarion because I feel like we want to hear from you. And I do want to say that, listening to Ilarion, I've heard, he was enslaved by the US government. And his people chose not to have blame and hatred in their hearts for the government, but really moved to maintain a heart filled with peace and love. And I don't want to take away your words and botch the story, but I feel like that's sort of like what this student is saying, that we have to take care of our own heart and cleanse our own thoughts and actions in order to act in a different way collectively. Am I getting this right at all? So I'm going to pass it to Ilarion or anyone else that wants to share.
Yeah, that's very good, Emily. By the way, can we have a copy of that letter?
Sure, yeah. I can send it to Leah and maybe Leah can get it out. Yeah.
Okay, because it's a really very, very excellent letter, in my opinion. Yeah, I'll just very quickly tell the story where, you know, when the Russians first arrived in the 1740s, they killed off most of our people. We lost 80% of our population in 50 years. And the first people that they killed were the apprentices and the shamans. What they didn't know were that the women were the ones that initiated the shamans. Anyway, and so we were bought by Alaska, was jurisdiction over Alaska was purchased in 1867. And then the US had jurisdiction, and they kept us as slaves from our original status with the Russians. And they kept us as slaves until 1966. This is something that most people don't know. They kept this from getting out into the world. And we were real slaves. I was born a slave. And I can't describe enough what that means, but you can imagine going to work in the morning for 17 hours a day, and the foreman, who is a government foreman, would tell you, "Oh, you stupid Aleuts, it takes 5 of you to dig a ditch," you know, and things like that. Browbeating every day, and protests was dealt with very harshly. The government would ration all the food, clothing, and housing. I grew up wearing a government issue jacket. I slept in a government issue bed, which was a single small mattress. You know, we were totally dependent for food, clothing, and housing on the government. And the protests were dealt with so harshly that you were either given cut in your food allocation, which case you and your family would suffer not having enough food. You would be jailed and ultimately deported off the island by yourself without your family, if you were the worst case. And so it was real slavery. And in World War II, we were interned, just like the Japanese Americans, except that unlike the Japanese Americans, we lost 10% of our population due to malnutrition and disease at the hands of the US government. We've had a Holocaust like the Jews had. We were enslaved like the African Americans, and we were interned like the Japanese Americans, and yet here we are, for example, as a product of our culture, that I grew up watching the elders. They never acted, said, or did anything that indicated their hatred or anger for anybody. In fact, it was the opposite. And that's the way I grew up. That's why I'm prepared then to talk with people from all walks of life. It's a really precious gift because they said if you have anger or hatred, you not only hurt yourself, but you hurt your people. And that's the understanding that they had. And the change in consciousness that we're talking about, that the elders that I work with talk about, is changing the consciousness of the mind to that of the heart, where traditionally the heart used to tell the mind what to do, and the mind's job was to implement that which your heart is telling you to do. And now it's reversed, so that the mind controls the heart and tells the heart what to do. And they're saying, we've got to reverse this, and we've got to reverse it now.
Ilarion, would you say that that's a perspective that all Indigenous people hold? And I know that's kind of a loaded question, or that seems like a weighty question, but is that something that is that you have and know through that relationship with the earth? Like, how is that relationship with the earth connected to what you just said between the heart and the mind?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. First of all, no, not all indigenous cultures have been able to keep their ways. It has been destroyed through through cultural erosion over time, but there are still cultures in existence in the world today that have had intimate and sustained connection with Mother Earth for thousands of years, and they maintain that. And what it is that in order for us to love Mother Earth, we've got to love all things feminine. When this imbalance, great imbalance happened, Mother Earth, well, let's see, women, goddess cultures, women healers, Mother Earth-based cultures, and Mother Earth herself are harmed in brutal ways. And it's still in existence today. It was like a pendulum that swung back and forth since the beginning of time. And we invented that time by slipping out of the proverbial present moment. And that's when time began. That's when, so we slipped into guilt, shame, remorse, anger, rage, jealousy, which is the past living with us today, or projection into the future of fear, which of something that hasn't happened yet. Every place except the proverbial now. And what the elders are asking is for us to remember who we are. That when we do that remembering, it's like my elder on St. Paul. Look, you think that bird worries about where it's going to get the food the next day? No. What my people showed me was that when you're present in the moment and in the heart, all things are taken care of. And you have to trust in a level that is not of the mind. You trust implicitly, trust in life, trust in your life, trust in your body, trust in Mother Earth, trust in the universe, trust in Aho, or the maker we call God. Trust completely in at the cellular level of the body, not something that is created in the mind. And when we do that, all things are taken care of. And I can attest to that myself.
Well, that's beautiful. Thank you. I'm so glad we have that recorded. So I think now is time for questions. I mean, this has been so beautiful to hear. Thank you. I think we have, time for questions or to steer the conversation in different ways. Does anyone want to bring up something or share something that's coming up for them? I mean, I think we're all science teachers, right? So like, I'd love to bring this conversation to, okay, what do I do tomorrow in my classroom? You know, how do we steer the ship?
It's actually interesting. Just today, I was researching emergent curriculum, and I'm kind of wondering if my understanding of emergent curriculum aligns with what Ilarion was talking about with emergence. Emergent curriculum is, it's kind of an early childhood idea that's based in Reggio Emilia, but it's like you as the educator getting to know your students, and you have a sense of like where you would like to see things going, but you really follow the interests of the youth and what they are curious about. And you are using your skill. It's not just like a random, who knows what we're going to do today. Like you're using your skills as an educator to guide and to support, but also there's a lot of choice. Does those ideas, do you feel like they kind of align, Ilarion, with what you were talking about with emergence?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know who did the study, but about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a study done in the UK about the intelligence of students, young people. And what they found out at the end of their study was that all children are geniuses. They're born geniuses because of their own creativity. And if we just allow that to happen, it will come forward. And so it's, it's something that our society doesn't recognize. We don't trust the child to have enough intelligence to figure out what it needs to know, what he or she needs to know. I mean, for heaven's sakes, I was 11 years old and I took a boat out into the Bering Sea, skippering it 10 miles off the island. This is not an accident. All children have these capabilities. And in fact, our elders say, you know, the teacher for our cultures, which is to keep us as real human beings, present in the moment and in the heart, is a 2-year-old child. And when you look at the 2-year-old child, when they're angry, they engage their whole bodies, and you know, they might be pissed off at their buddy that they're playing with, and they get into it and they're done with it in 2 minutes and they're playing again. This is a child is an expert in energy, and they know how to move energy. And my elder, Rita Blumenstein, who is a spiritual counselor for the Indigenous Council of the 13 Grandmothers, said, when you stifle your emotions, and it's like creating a stagnant pool inside of you of these emotions. And over time, it will make you sick. And so we are energy beings. We must let this energy go. This is the purpose of Indigenous cultures. The real underlying purpose of Indigenous cultures is to move energy through chanting, through singing, through all this kind of ways. And we now just take the surface of the cultures and say that's the extent of its meaning. No. And so look at our society, how we have covered our emotions to protect ourselves because it's not safe. And we have so much tied up inside of us that we really need to get rid of. And so when we process, you go and process these things that are stuck in the mind, and then you let them go. And gradually you fall into your heart. And the 2-year-old child, I mean, I was at a Native gathering of 2,000 Native Americans in a circle, and in middle of the circle walks a 2-year-old child. She was buck naked. She wasn't worried about who was going to say, oh, you know, she was just being a real human being. And that's, if you want to learn how to do that, watch a 2-year-old child.
There's some great, Ilarion, there's some great responses coming in through the chat, talking about like connecting sort of your heartfulness and meditation, sort of personal spiritual practice into the classroom, and how to merge those things, how to connect with a structured curriculum. Do you have suggestions for practices for us to recapture our joy and heart from childhood that brought so many of us to life sciences and education? How do we bring that into a very mind-centered experience in the classroom?
That's an excellent question. Yeah, you know, first of all, get in touch with your heart and hear what your heart says about doing something with kids. Your heart knows, it already knows. It's filled with love, compassion, and all the positivity that we are as human beings when we allow it to come forward. And that when you get to that point, you trust that what your heart is telling you to do is right. And in anything that you do, I mean, I use this in everything that I do. I just trust my heart. I don't trust my mind. My mind can be filled with tricks, and it might trick me, but your heart never tricks you, and it guides you impeccably. And so, you know, when you watch a 2-year-old child, how many of you used to jump up and down on beds? Raise your hand. Okay, most of you. You would jump up and down bed. Well, the genius of a child, I'll show you. Jumping up and down like that, the astronauts use that as their way, part of their physical training, because it's called reverse gravity. When your internal organs go down, you go up, you're flushing your organs. That's a natural. How many of you have done gibberish when you were a kid? Yeah, I'll bet you most of you did. Okay, gibberish is also another way of releasing energy. And it's all about releasing of energy. You can find the fun ways that you would like. This is bringing back your own child. Find the fun ways that you like to expand your energy, to let it go. And you can't go wrong by doing that in the class.
Questions for Milt or Ilarion?
Well, there's a question about nature studies. You know, the one thing that there are more and more people that are doing these kind of classes of nature, and they're really good. They're coming close to the way that can really help. And what we need to let go of is our definition of nature, which is for recreation or sport, something that we would get out of nature. And what we do as Indigenous people, you just be, you just experience it, not judge it, not have your mind active in saying, oh, wow, look at that bird over there. You know, just experience it. That is the most effective way, I feel, to bring young people along in understanding what nature really is. And silence is very important in this process for human beings. We're surrounded by noise all the time. And, you know, I often complain that when I go to a restaurant, I don't like to go to an American restaurant because they're so noisy, you have to holler to talk. How many of you have experienced that? And so you have to have the silence that is necessary to commune with Mother Earth. You have to slow down, silence yourself, and just experience.
Yeah, I was laughing because when we gave a presentation at the OSTA late last fall, and I said, oh, I'm having my students go to a sit spot, like a nature spot during their Zoom class, and I'm having them journal. And Ilarion said, no journaling, just sitting.
Yes, exactly right. Just be. Don't have anything to distract you from being with Mother Earth.
I think I'm also thinking about reciprocity and how, you know, we can invite that concept in. And, you know, I mean, it's hard right now while we're not at school, but like, are there spaces we can, you know, observe and sort of care for over time with youth, and kind of just teaching that concept too?
Exactly, because we live in a society that's take. And when you go to a mindset of reciprocity, your first thought is, what can you give? And that is more important than taking. And today, you know, even this taking philosophy has gone to an extreme where when people pray, like they've been praying for the end of war for thousands of years, but yet war still persists. We pray for that, please, God, give me help to help my loved one who's suffering, you know, help. Give me this. And what Native people do, Indigenous people, is they just give thanks and gratitude to God, because we are given everything that we need, and we don't recognize that.
Wow. Thank you all. Lee, I think it's probably just about time to wrap up. But Emily, thank you. And Larry and boy, thank you so much again. Um, I'm going to post right now a message in the chat box on a book that's available on how do we embody all of this work. And I would invite others. I know Rose Madrone is on here with several videos and so forth to help with connection to the earth. And any of you that have material, please post it in the chat box before we leave. And if I might, I'd like to say, in addition to thank you, just a couple more words of my own particular dream really is that because we need education so badly, but the structure of education sometimes precludes us getting what we need. I'd really want to continue this conversation, and I'd like people here um, to invite people who are thinking outside the box, not angry, not fighting something, but knowing these are the aspirations, these are the principles, this is the beauty that we're seeking, and to help create a better education system, because we're relying on education to build more bridges, to help people embody earth-based cultures. We're relying on education just to take that simple message of what makes a living system, so that when the children do go out into nature, they internalize it much more completely. I know that my own learning has helped me to internalize it, and I think there'll be others that do that. And I've talked to Lee about maybe doing a future session, perhaps in March, if we can schedule it, um, and um, and maybe one even later in the spring before school lets out. So please think about, reflect on what we've done, think about it, and make your suggestions to how you suggest we move forth. Um, and how is education moving forth right now, and how do we build on that? Because as Ilarion said earlier, we don't have a lot of time. We've got to take some very right steps very soon. So thank you all. Thank you, Ilarion. Thank you, Leah, and thank you, Emily and Leah. I guess we can stay on and talk. Leah.
I just wanted to say, Milt, thank you for allowing me to be on here, and everyone else who is here attentively listening. And, I would like to encourage you to explore ways in which you can within the system, explore the things that I talk about, some of the most, the important things that sticks out to you. I do this all the time. I'm a visiting scholar at Columbia University every year, and they invite me back because I'm showing, and these are PhD candidates that are going to be teaching at universities and colleges and high schools and wherever else that they're going, and they really dig into what are these alternative ways that we really need now. They recognize that we need it now. And I do this with the University of Alaska and a lot of different kinds of universities all over, Villanova. They're taking it on, and you can too. And you can do it just slowly but surely.
Would people like to stay on longer and have a little more conversation? Are we,
I,
are you
I would
okay?
I would like to say hello from the other part of Alaska to Ilarion. I live in Southeast Alaska, so it was an amazingly wonderful gift to hear from him today, and all of you, but especially nice to have another Alaskan on board.
Yeah, Patty, thank you. Good to see you.
Yes. I might be in touch with you because we are still, the Alaska Science Teachers Association hopes to have an in-person conference, maybe like next October, the end of October. And our theme is leveraging learning and equity through STEAM. So you would totally fit right in. We have several Indigenous speakers and we're trying really hard to weave these kinds of things, but you are the first speaker at a science conference that I've heard making the weave this way. So thank you.
Okay, yeah, I look forward to that. And you can get my contact information through Emily or Milt.
Okay. Thank you.
I would like to ask a question, if I may, about hopefully in Oregon having Native science taught. And I'm very excited and fortunate to be teaching at a level where we think it's going to fit in best with our curriculum. And so I'm looking forward to incorporating what has been developed. And I would love to hear what are some phrases and bits of wisdom that you could share. For example, when you spoke in the beginning, I would love to know what that looks like and to be able to practice hearing and saying it, to be able to like impart that or share that. I'd also like to find out anything else that you personally would think would be a good way to like open a class in a way that would emulate a different way of doing things in a more Indigenous perspective.
Okay, you know, I don't know what you're referring to about what I said in the beginning, but Ongwan, which is hello, my other self. This is, it requires a shift. That's part of the shift that we do is it requires that shift from the mind to the heart to see the other person as my other self. But women can understand that more than men can, because women in their wombs, they birth a child. They have this stranger in them, in their bodies, and then the magic happens in their birth, that you can see how you are my other self. And by the way, women are going to take the lead during these times. That's what all my elders tell me from around the world, that during this time, women are going to take the lead, and they're going to take the lead because they understand relationship to self, relationship to your family, relationship to loved ones, and they are immersed in that kind of relationship. It's also a relationship to Mother Earth, and relationship around the world, where we become so divided, but we can see the wisdom of working together. And this is why women are going to take the lead. In addition to that, from our standpoint, we have what is called the womb at the center of the universe. And that's where we get all of our information about life. And that womb, for lack of a better way to put it, is the source of all creation and creativity. And the identical field of energy is in every woman through their womb. It contains this field of energy that is creation and creativity. And until women get together and understand that, nothing new is going to be done on Earth.
I have a question, but I don't know. I don't want to take up space if other people have questions. Okay, I'm going to go for it. I guess I'm just particularly fascinated by this idea of not having the bitterness and the anger as a culture against those that enslaved you. And so do you think, so I guess I'm just reflecting on experiences of oppression or what feels like injustice in my life, personal feelings of this person harmed me, and working through all the layers of that and trying to get to love and, getting closer. And curious if you think that's just a cultural, the feelings of jealousy and hatred and bitterness, if that's a cultural, like a soup that I'm swimming in, and so that's culturally okay to have those feelings, or if those are human feelings, and how your culture doesn't have are the feelings not there, or have the tools to move through those emotions? Maybe it's a combination of both. Just kind of fascinating.
Yeah, it's something that is ingrained in the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And what bitterness or hatred that is experienced today is caused by this pendulum of masculine imbalance and feminine imbalance that first started with the masculine imbalance thousands of years ago. And it's still here with us today. And so when we have these negative thoughts, they come from this imbalance that has occurred thousands of years ago that we're still experiencing now. So, for example, command and control, manage, resources, wood, all these things are created by this imbalance. It's not wood, it's tree. It is part of a tree, whether or not it's dead or alive. And we think about, what did I call it? What was that I called it? I forgot. Okay, anyway, when we have these thoughts like the wars and all these kinds of things, your heart doesn't have that. It doesn't. It just doesn't. And as long as you're tangled somewhere else, you know that you're not in the heart if you have bitterness or anger. And my people don't have any bitterness or anger. And I can only attribute that to the elders that taught us through their demeanor and through their actions and their words that this is the way we view the world. You are my other self. Now, when you have these constructs in your mind now, that's something that is to be expected. And how you work out of it, for example, might be picture this guy who did this horrible thing and go back in time until you see that person as a child and how that person was treated by his parents and passed down from generation to generation to generation until you have it here now. That it doesn't mean that you condone what that person does, but you at least have compassion that you can understand that person, and that the actions that person takes is something that you condemn, but the person's him or herself you don't condemn. That person is my other self.
Thank you.
Can I say this? Because typing in the chat takes me too long. There's something called a Ho'oponopono or Ho'oponopono. Ho'oponopono. Thank you. And I feel like that's one that it kind of embraces this of, I love you, I'm sorry, forgive me, thank you, which is, gratitude and sort of asking forgiveness for, whatever ancestral situation brought me to this point and whatever ancestral situation brought you to your point that we're having this meeting, that we, resolve this um, situation such that, you know, our ancestors and us are released from whatever this is, right? If it was some historical trauma that's created those emotions, those situations. And I feel like having done that, practiced that some, I'm amazed at how that's cleared things, whether I say the prayer before my classes and to my kids on the computer before I see them, or when things are coming up and a kid's having some conflict or issues and I say it and then later it just like melts away. I've just been blown away about how that has worked.
Yes, absolutely right. It's one of the most powerful tools. Ho'oponopono is one way to do it. For those of you who don't know or have ever heard of that, research that and you will see, especially don't look at a textbook definition, but look at the Hawaiian people and how they use the word. You can find example of that on the internet. But anyway, the forgiveness portion is very, very important. You know, there was, and Milt, you know about this, that there was a group of young men led by an elder that went on horseback to this community. I can't remember which one it was, but anyway, they went there and asked for they were Native Americans, and they asked for the community's forgiveness. Can you imagine? And because they understand the power of that please forgive me, to be able to clear out stuff that you have for hundreds or maybe just this lifetime, but it really does work. And forgiving yourself, above all, the elder said, the most unselfish thing that you can do is to heal yourself. And the first thing that you must come to grips with is to forgive yourself for all the things that you think or judge or criticize in yourself. And this is why, you know, the elders say nothing is created outside until it's created inside first. I criticize on the outside because I criticize on the inside. I judge on the outside because I judge on the inside. I trash on the environment on the outside because we're trashing the environment on the inside. Nothing is created outside until it's created inside first. And so, yeah. Well, I think, Milt, it should be enough, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I think so. That video that he just mentioned is Dakota 38. And I put a note in here so you can each see that it's on YouTube. It really is kind of a must situation. It's Jim Miller and his wife, Alberta Ironclad Miller. And Alberta, Larry, you probably remember this. I was trying to organize something, which is my sort of Western way of being one time. And she wrote me this beautiful note. And she said, Milt, you can't organize this. If it doesn't have spirit, it's not going to happen. And boy, what a lesson that is. And that's what we, I think, are creating here, and just need to continue to create. And the other thing that I talked to them about, and also with the Ho'oponopono people, when I was able to experience that, is there's something that's so prevalent in the whole culture that it makes all of the forgiveness work. It's that energy connection. And when you're in that energy connection and you feel the dissonance, you just have to clean it up. Mm. And I think that's where Jim Miller was coming from in Dakota 38. Festered for 150 years, had to clean it up. So it's a huge part of our work.
Yeah,
Thank you.
What
Thank you
you
all.
said is very true. And I think that's at the heart of the message that I was trying to say, is that it is energetic, and it's energetic first, then it takes form through our actions. So thank you all for paying so much attention to this and asking your question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll be in touch. Bye, y'all.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much.
Thank you,
Thank-
Leah. Thank you, Emily.
Yeah.
Thank you, Larry.
Okay, thank you.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Oh, Ilarion. Milt, may I ask one question before you close it? Are you the one who's going to close it?
Yes, I have the end meeting in front of me, yeah.
If you don't mind, I just wanted to say this has been a huge, like, wow, epiphany thing, because these are stuff that's been going on for me for a long time. I'm so grateful that you're doing this. This is like what I've been, I'll have to say, praying for, hoping for, waiting for. You know what I mean? This is manifesting. And I definitely want to let you know about a meditation called Heartfulness, because it is so what this is. And it is like, I'm just like, wow, this is so great to be coming from my science stuff, because this is what I'm doing in a very different way. And so I want to say, if you're interested, or if anybody else is interested, look up Heartfulness, because it talks about this very stuff about how we've got to do our cleaning, that you can meditate all you want, but until you clean stuff out, you know, the meditation is only half the practice. And the meditation is not on the mind, which most people focus on mindfulness. It's called Heartfulness because the meditation is on the heart, and the heart's where you start, and the heart's what needs to be cleared. And what Ilarion was just saying about, you know, cleaning out these particular things, the biggest negative thing that can get wedged in the heart or cause the effects is guilt, and that's the one that needs to be cleaned. And there's very specific ways to meditate on very specific regions of the heart to clear these things. So there's some science developing out of this spiritual practice, and it might blow your mind. It's blowing mine, and I'm so grateful to see this is happening, because it's like I'm feeling like my worlds are converging now in a way that I've been wanting them to for a long time. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kelly.
All right, thanks.
It's
Bye-bye.
Christy.
Christy.
Kelly's your last name. It's Christy.
Yes, yes.
Right. Well, thank you for joining us. And thank you.
I
for
look forward
sharing.
to getting this information, and I look forward to this continuing. I would love to continue this on a regular basis.
Thank you. We'll do
Thanks.
it. Thanks.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.